What is happening, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are here to discuss the history of EC Comics, some of the greatest horror, crime, suspense, science fiction comics ever created, the rise and fall of an empire. Stay tuned. Alright, so what we have here is EC Comics, The New Trend. This is the smaller version of this book. You can get a much larger version for a much higher price point if you would like. I find this version to be quite comfortable to read. We have an annoying little flap here that is best just to tuck right under the book itself. You can use that as a bookmark if you like. We have some beautiful end pages here on the front and back. Shout out to Scott, the retired wrestler / plumber in Edmonton, who let me know there is a smaller size version of this book. I thought I would have to shell out a few $100s for the oversized version. This book is just over 500 pages. First, it discusses the early history of EC Comics from 1937 to 1950. Then it goes into the New Trend era from 1950 to 1954. Then it goes into the New Direction era, which is 1955 to 1956 and onward. And the rest is a cover gallery consisting of about 200 pages. Some definite spoilers ahead. Maxwell Charles Gaines, one of the founding fathers of the American comic book, initially specializing in giveaway comics, in 1938 created a successful sister company called All American Comics, which featured characters like the Atom, the Flash, Green Lantern, Hawkman, Wonder Woman. Hot-tempered kind of guy, thought very poorly of his son, told him he would never amount to anything. Boy, was he wrong. Eventually, Maxwell's business arrangement at All American Comics soured. He got a big payday from that, created EC Comics, which stood for Educational Comics, had titles like Stories from the Bible, Tiny Tots Comics, Dandy Comics, Moon Girl, which is pretty much a ripoff of Wonder Woman. Pretty sissy kind of stuff. In 1947, he gets killed in a boating accident, leaves the company to his son. Bill wants nothing to do with the company at the time. In fact, he's finishing up his studies to be a chemistry teacher. The company isn't doing very well. It's about $100K in debt. Bill just shows up periodically to sign the payroll slips. Still reluctant to join the company at the time, but then finally jumps on board and takes responsibility. Soon after, he meets Al Feldstein. Reviewing his portfolio, he's very impressed with his drawings of women especially. Feldstein jumps on board, and we soon have one of the greatest comic book collaborations in history, creating the best horror, crime, science fiction, suspense, He-Man, and humor stories ever created to this day. Titles like The Vault of Horror, The Crypt of Terror, later renamed Tales from the Crypt, The Haunt of Fear, Weird Science, Weird Fantasy, Two-Fisted Tales, Frontline Combat, Crime Suspense Stories, Shock Suspense Stories, Mad, and Panic, all roughly taking place between 1950 and 1955. At the beginning of the collaboration between Gaines and Feldstein, they went all in with horror. That was EC's bread and butter for the most part. Generally 4 stories to an issue. As time went on, company grew. More artists and writers jumped on board. Creators like Wally Wood, Graham Ingalls, Harvey Kurtzman, Jack Davis, Al Williamson, Joe Orlando, and many more. I'm not going to name everyone. After horror came science fiction, and then Two-Fisted Tales, which were He-Man type stories, war stories, pirate stories, stuff like that. Two-Fisted Tales was Harvey Kurtzman's baby, but it required a big budget, a lot of research to do. I personally didn't like much of this series and Frontline Combat, as I don't typically go for war stories and comics. I was always more into the horror, science fiction, crime, and suspense stories myself. There are a ton of fun facts and Easter eggs in this book. If you're definitely a fan of the titles, there's no reason why you shouldn't like this book. By 1954, the attack on crime and horror comics had reached a boiling point. Quite a few magazine articles were written on these comic books being a negative impact on the youth. A book was written by some asshole doctor called Seduction of the Innocent, trashing these types of comics. Bill Gaines attempted to defend his comics and his company, but after lengthy and exhausting debates, just decided to scrap his horror, crime, and suspense titles and focus on what would be known as EC's new direction with brand new titles. Titles like Impact, Valor, Extra, Aces High, Incredible Science Fiction, Piracy, and Psychoanalysis, all of which did very poorly and were cancelled within a short amount of time. Sometime in 1954, the Comics Code Authority kicked in, and it was very difficult for them to make comics. I guess this new trend was their kind of last hope. So no one wanted to buy EC Comics. Parents were gathering comics up to be burned. There's different organizations bad-mouthing EC Comics and other similar publishers. It was a bad time, right? This here was the new direction of books that I was referring to. They tried, right? They tried to keep it clean, but didn't work. Stories weren't the same. They even tried to get into magazines just to get around the whole Comics Code Authority and their censorship. They introduced 4 new titles: Terror, Shock, Crime, and Confessions Illustrated. These were more wordy stories. They had a little bit of artwork. They were advertised as picto-fiction. I mean, I enjoyed most of them, but I guess EC's name was already dragged through the mud at this point, and they didn't sell. These books did not sell. In fact, the only title that was successful after the introduction of the Comics Code was Mad. But there was a falling out with Kurtzman. Feldstein took over Mad, and it became very successful. So lots of goodies in this book, if you are a fan of these comics. We're in the cover gallery at the moment. The only negative thing I have to say regarding this cover gallery is sometimes they, put 4 issues on a page. I think if they increase this book's page count by like 20 or 30 pages, they could have had a dedicated cover for each page, right? That would have been nice, because the 4 on 1 is just, it looks really squished, right? You can't make out much of the finer details. So we are currently in the Haunt of Fear section of covers in the cover gallery. We went through Vault of Horror, The Crypt of Terror, later titled Tales from the Crypt, moving along into Weird Science, and then Weird Fantasy. All great titles. And as the years rolled on by, eventually we got different types of collections: hardcover collections, softcover collections. Some are still available today, some are being reprinted. I picked up the soft covers from Dark Horse, the EC archives that they reprinted a few years back. I know they are reprinting Tales from the Crypt. Currently it's being solicited. Got a Frank Frazetta cover there, very nice. So I don't see them releasing just Tales from the Crypt complete without releasing the other material, but you never know. Get them while you can, because this stuff it's fantastic. It's it's stuff that you're going to keep for the rest of your life, hopefully. And my only gripe is obviously the recoloring on some of the newer collections. Maybe I'll look for older collections that were released prior, or maybe one day they'll release a collection with more period appropriate paper where the colors are not so bright and vibrant, as that was the problem with the newer Dark Horse collections, because they were modern colors, as they would call them. And this book is pretty much a semi-gloss, not too bright, not too glary, the pages I found. Although some of the double page spreads were a little bit tight and overlapping, but fairly reasonable for the most part. This book retails for, well, I'm Canadian, so I paid about $42, or you can get the larger, oversized version, which is about 275 Canadian. So it's a big cost difference. I didn't mind this size at all. It's much more comfortable. I knew if I would have got the bigger version, it would have been such a pain to read. I'd have to mount it on a book stand or something like that just to read it. This, I could just sit on the couch comfortably and read it, right? I didn't feel I was missing out by not getting the larger one, although there were some pieces of art or some pages that I would have liked to seen a little bit bigger, but no big deal on my end. It's up to you which way you want to go, right? The larger one's going to be much more heavier and much more expensive. And that concludes our video for today. Hope you enjoyed yourself. Hope you learned something. Hope you end up picking up some of these books if you haven't done so already. And I'll just leave you with a shot of my EC collection. Until next time, EC fan addicts, boys and ghouls, take care.